You know, guys, when I hear people talk about polls, the first thing that comes to my mind is the United States election in 2016. You remember how Donald Trump won the election, despite the polls saying that Hillary Clinton was going to win the elections. I remember how everyone had already concluded that Donald Trump was going to lose the election because of the polls, because the polls were saying Hillary Clinton had 80% over Donald Trump. There's absolutely no way that Donald Trump can win the elections against Hillary Clinton. But you know what happened, man. You know what happened? Hillary Clinton never healed from that. Because she thought that she was going to be the first female president of the United States, and she didn't think that chance was going to be taken away from her by some entertainer. I mean, Donald Trump is just an entertainer. A business guy and an entertainer. Hillary Clinton, with her resume, her thick political resume, she didn't think that Donald Trump was going to be able to win the elections. No one thought that Donald Trump was going to win the elections because the polls said that Hillary Clinton was going to win the elections. So, guys, we are looking into 2024 as South Africa, and I hear a lot of people talk about the polls. They're talking about how the ANC is not going to win. They're talking about how the EFF is going to win the government. Like, it's a mess, guys. So, what are your thoughts on the polls? Do you trust the polls? Because personally, I believe that the polls are being conducted by certain people who are trying to push a certain narrative, man. I don't think the polls are real. So, guys, today I want us to watch this interview of Rabbi Goldstein when he's talking with Dr. Frans Cronje. You know, Dr. Frans Cronje is one of the most, I must say that he's one of the most smartest political analysts in South Africa, man. The guy is amazing. Dr. Frans Cronje, the guy is amazing. So they're going to talk about 2024 and what they think might happen in 2024. So, guys, what are your thoughts? Do you believe the polls? And what do you think is going to happen in 2024?
The other thing that people are concerned about is, the elections, 2024 elections, which are just about a year away. I think some of the feedback that I got after our first conversation in episode 1 was, this big fear of, an ANC-EFF alliance in.
Honestly, guys, I believe that there's a huge possibility of South Africa seeing the African National Congress going into coalition with the Economic Freedom Fighters. I think there's a huge possibility that the ANC will go into coalition with the EFF, man. I mean, like, you look at the African National Congress, you know that the African National Congress is corrupt and it's incompetent, and the members of the African National Congress, they love money, they worship money. You look at the members of the Economic Freedom Fighters, they are the same thing. The Economic Freedom Fighters was born from the African National Congress. The Economic Freedom Fighters are the students of the African National Congress. So it's not going to be hard for Ramaphosa to put Malema online, but if he has to go into coalition with John Steiners, and the DA is going to give him a hard time. And the DA might as well hold cadres accountable for some of the things that they have already done. But there's no way that the EFF is going to hold the cadres accountable for some of the things that they have already done. Those are some of the arguments that I've heard, that Ramaphosa and the ANC, they love money. The EFF and the ANC, they love money. Worst part is that the EFF comes from the ANC. So it is not going to be hard for the African National Congress to govern with the Economic Freedom Fighters. The only bad thing is that things might not work out smoothly, man. Things might not work out smoothly, not for them, but for South Africans, because there's this thing that these guys are not going to be able to hold each other accountable.
In that election, and where that would, where that would take the country. So that's the feedback I received from our last conversation, and I'm just here to share the questions and things that are bothering our community. So what's your take on that fear, and how are these elections in 2024 looking?
Yeah, we're far away from that still. We're a year out from or just less than that, out from the 2024 election. The most recent data continues to suggest that the ANC is flirting with the 50% figure. So my call is that if an election were held today, the ANC on its own would be just over 50%.
Did you hear that, guys? Did you hear that?
Today, the ANC on its own would be just over 50%. A few people who hear that say, well, that surprises them with load shedding and all the rest. One of my answers to that is, when I started my career, they were at 70. And being at 50 is a hell of a steep fall. urban areas, the ANC is polling at only 30%, so it's lost the urban aspirant middle class perhaps permanently. And its 50% is essentially a function of an aging rural demographic that keeps it in power. But that demographic will erode over time at a combination of the country's mortality and urbanization rates. So that's not enough to keep the ANC in power. So in the fullness of time, the ANC still loses an election. It just may not be the next election. Even if
Dr. Frans Cronje is telling the truth, guys. If the elections were to be held today, the ANC will win. The ANC will win, mainly because there is nothing that the opposition parties are doing. There's nothing that they are doing. They are not doing anything. They are not taking the fight from the African National Congress. The ANC, they still have a support despite their bad service delivery, despite load shedding. They still have support on the ground. If you have followed the African National Congress ever since they started with their manifesto reviews, man, they are doing these different stadiums almost every week. They are doing a different stadium in South Africa, and people are packed in those in those stadiums. People are packed in those stadiums. You would think that with the collapsing infrastructure, with the fact that we barely have electricity in the country, people would want nothing to do with the African National Congress. But I really encourage you to watch some of their manifesto reviews and see the numbers of people who are attending the ANC rallies. You can see that the African National Congress is still strong, man. It's still strong. Like I previously said in one of my videos, that the service delivery and load shedding are not going to be a factor going into 2024. South Africans have proven that they don't care about service delivery, because throughout the years, South Africans have voted for the African National Congress despite the fact that we've had bad service delivery. When it comes to load shedding, the African National Congress is simply going to get load shedding under control for 3 months before the elections, and no one will have anything to run against the African National Congress. And guess what? The ANC is going to win the elections. I agree with Frans Cronje. The ANC is going to lose the elections, but not in 2024.
The ANC is slightly below 50%. It's got enough friends and allies and proxies that it can call upon, short of the EFF, to get itself back over the 50% level again. Even if it makes a deal with the EFF, it's a very risky moment that, if handled incorrectly, could send the country into failed status. That's true. However, for that to happen, the ANC and EFF, in their 5 years together in partnership ahead of the next election, would need to ensure that we never reach the next election. Because if we did, the consequences just of the sentiment shift on South Africa following that alliance, given the mad policy proposals of the EFF and its ANC and its allies in the ANC, which isn't the whole of the ANC, would be sufficient to so depress living standards in South Africa, a relationship we understand very well, how living standards inform voter behaviour, that over that 5-year interval, exacerbated by the aging rural demographic, combined ANC-EFF support should fall to well below 50%, and they are both removed in the election of 2029. It is more likely, stripping hope and fear out of it, that happens, they collectively lose in 29, than that they prevail to destroy the country's democracy and we don't go to another election and become a failed state. And the reason for that is that what they have to do to achieve that is they have to erode the constitutional edifice, freedom of speech, the rule of law, property rights.
Man, it's done with us, man. If these guys, they touch the freedom of speech, man, this channel is done. If the ANC, man, interferes with our freedom of speech, man, the channel is done. Just like in Zimbabwe, man, you know that President Ramaphosa supports everything that the Zimbabwean government is doing, man. You know that right now in Zimbabwe, people can say anything. Because if you say anything that is contrary to the government narrative, you might go to jail. You might go to jail. And this is what Frans Cronje is trying to warn us about. That these guys...
Fiscal prudence. It's a long list of very difficult objectives, made more difficult by the fact that South Africa has a battle-hardened and experienced civil society sector which has proven very good at defeating, and in part, the war isn't won, these are battles, the worst of state capture, the threat of expropriation, and a whole host of other things. And if you just asked me on the cold sort of rationality of it, ANC-EFF versus the Constitution, backed up by South Africa's civil society, I'd say if that civil society is well resourced, it will win in the end. So even an ANC-EFF deal, I think, is survivable. Difficult, but survivable.
But one thing I don't understand, man, is that if you have followed what the Democratic Alliance have been saying going into 2024, they're saying that them and their Moonpeg partners will not work with the African National Congress, and they will not even work with the Economic Freedom Fighters. So essentially, these guys are pushing the ANC and the EFF together. And now that we are facing with the possibility of the ANC and the EFF coming together, they are saying, okay, guys, this might be the worst combination in the world. So what exactly do they expect the ANC to do? What do you expect the ANC to do? Because you closed the door of working with African National Congress. The Moon Pact has closed the door of working with the ANC and the EFF. But at the same time, the same guys who said that they don't want nothing to do with the ANC and the EFF are crying when they see the possibility of the ANC and the EFF coming together. So what did you expect, man? What did you expect the ANC was going to do? What did you expect the ANC was going to do? Because the more you push out the ANC and the EFF out of the way, the more you say that you will never work with the ANC and the EFF, chances are these guys are going to come together and be like, okay, they don't want anything to do with us, man. We might as well partner up and govern South Africa together. And your worst fear might come true. The worst fear might come true. So I don't think these guys were strategic enough when they started saying that they're not going to work with the ANC and the EFF. They did not realize by saying that they are practically moving these guys they are pushing these guys to come together. They are pushing these guys to come together. So now there's a huge possibility of that thing happening. People are crying. People are all over the place saying that this might be the worst combination, because finally you get to understand that the EFF comes from the ANC. The EFF is the ANC, essential.
The prospect of the broader opposition winning an election and pushing the ANC and EFF together to below 50 at this time isn't good, because that opposition finds itself in conflict with itself to a far too great an extent to inculcate the reasonable expectation in the minds of voters that it can govern the country successfully. There are some exciting new opposition options that are emerging. They may begin to help to change that. But at this time, no, it doesn't look like the broader opposition can win. Outside of 3 provinces, the Western Cape firmly in opposition hands, but watch that one closely. 19% of the population of the Western Cape is white, 50% is coloured, 30% is black. It will be very difficult for the DA to hold the Western Cape if the coloured vote in the Western Cape splits. Now, the coloured vote has always split between the ANC and the DA in the Cape. But we now have newcomers, such as Gayton McKenzie, who I think people look at and consider his history and so time in prison and so on, and write him off. And that's a mistake, because I think he's a very capable, potentially very capable political operator and actor. So watch what happens in the Western Cape. In Natal, we see the ANC falling far below 50%, and we see a clear surge for the IFP, borne out by some by-election results, the recent ones, which were stunning for the IFP. We also see McKenzie, by the way, in coloured communities in the Eastern Cape and the Western Cape, securing stunning results for his PA party against the DA. Third one to watch is Gauteng, ANC well below 50 again. The question there is, does the ANC and the EFF collectively have a majority in Gauteng? That changes from poll to poll, it's on a knife edge. If they don't, and the broader opposition can keep the collective out of power in Gauteng, They can collective ANC EFF. They could probably keep them. They could more likely keep them out of power at a national level as well. So that Gauteng battleground becomes very important. When we meet again, or whenever that's scheduled, if it's, I will have updated numbers for you on what's happening in the Western Cape. We'll also, before the end of the year, have updated numbers on KZN. So we know exactly what's happening in those two provinces. We're also going to test the national picture on South Africa again, so we can update the exact standing of the parties for you before the end of the year.
So you're saying in short here, firstly, that if the election were held today, in essence, you're saying most likely outcome in your opinion, national would be ANC, but not with the EFF. They would squeak in with...
The national with the ANC. My election today, ANC wins 51, 52, 53%.
Man, if the elections were to be held today, man, the ANC would easily get like 54, I think. Easily get 54. There's nothing that the opposition parties have done, man. There's nothing.
That is not the worst result. I hear a lot of let's throw the ANC out of power and terrible people, banish them to the political wilderness. You can understand the sentiment behind that. Many people in the ANC feel that way too. But be careful. Do not wish for the ANC's demise before you know exactly what's going to replace it. Don't roll that dice.
Yes.
The reason for that is serious. That we may have one shot as a free and open democratic society to transition from the post-94 government to a new one. If the coalition in government is chaotic and shambolic and disappoints people, that may be more than a disappointment just in the coalition, but may increase or raise to a dangerous extent doubts in the merits of democracy itself. And if that happens, we open the door to radical populism. It's a safer position to have the ANC in power for 5 years and allow the opposition to organize themselves properly, I argue for you, than it is to throw the ANC out of power, even if one had the power to do that, and gamble on whatever is going to take its place.
And that's what people have been doing, man, recently, because people have been saying that we no longer want the African National Congress to run the country. We are sick and tired of the ANC, but no one is telling you that if we replace the African National Congress, who are we going to replace it with? If we take the ANC out of power, who are we going to replace it with? And I think the ANC, they know that people are concerned about this whole thing. That's why they go around telling the people that, guys, there is no alternative. We know that the ANC hasn't been doing a good job. We know that the African National Congress hasn't been performing the way that you guys would like us to perform. But the truth of the matter is that there's no alternative of the African National Congress. There is no one that you can replace the African National Congress with. And these are some of the things that people think about before they put their eggs there when they vote. These are the things that people think about, man. You cannot ignore the fact that these opposition parties haven't proven it enough that they can do their job. They haven't proven that they want to get their hands dirty. They haven't proven that they are ready to serve South Africans. They haven't proven that. Going around and telling people what's wrong with African National Congress when people know exactly what's wrong with African National Congress is doing nothing, man. They haven't proved that. Okay, you can trust us. Because right now the ANC is saying these guys, they don't have experience. They are saying we've been in charge for 30 years. The African National Congress has been in charge since 1994. And these guys are simply popping out of nowhere. Are you going to trust the guy who doesn't even know how to run a municipality? The African National Congress has been running the municipalities for 30 years. But guess what? We know that we are not perfect. But we have experience. We know what we are talking about. You elected these guys from the EFF or you elected these guys from the IFP. These guys, they don't know nothing about governing the country. These guys are going to take you under. And these are the issues that people resonate with. These are the issues that people resonate with. I've heard people saying that, yeah, even the African National Congress, they didn't have experience before they governed after the apartheid. But well, the African National Congress has had 30 years. And in that 30 years, they're going to use that 30 years to say, we've learned in these 30 years, we are the only ones who can improve your life. These guys, They don't know nothing about governing the country. If these guys, they govern the country is going to go down. That's what they're saying, man. That's what they're saying. Pajazal Sufi did an interview with Sowetan, or I think it's Sowetan. Yeah, he did an interview with Sowetan recently. And he said that, guys, there is no alternative. People have to vote for the African National Congress. There is no alternative. So, guys, which party, like, if we were to replace the African National Congress, which party would replace the African National Congress and would do a stellar job? Which party, man?
Because the amount of conflict and infighting in the opposition ranks now is such that I do not have confidence that they could successfully handle the task of governing the country. Now, there's a year to go. That can be fixed and addressed. So there's still a long way out. But at this time, that is the most likely result.
Yeah, so you're saying national ANC sort of squeaks in, and the chances are that Gauteng, Western Cape, and KZN are governed then by the coalition of the current opposition parties. The three biggest provinces from an economic point of view would then be in opposition hands, and then you're saying that this would lay the platform, for a 2029 victory then, potentially for opposition.
Yeah, there are a lot of complex results now, new ones that are emerging, given some of the later numbers. If the ANC is below 50 nationally and below 50 in Natal, to make a deal with Inkatha. So to Inkatha, you get free rein to govern Natal. You do a confidence and support agreement with us, which is the confidence and support agreement is an important concept for South Africans to begin to understand. You don't have to go into alliance with another party to put it in government as a coalition. Confidence and support agreement is a halfway point where you say you will oppose any motions of no confidence in the ANC's government just for the sake of stability, and you will support it in getting the budget through so that the country can be governed. So let's say ANC below 50 nationally, and in Natal, you give Natal to the IFP, and the IFP puts the ANC back in at a national level. Let's say ANC below 50 nationally, just below 50, and below in KZN and Gauteng. A similar kind of deal can be. I'm just using the example of Inkatha this evening. It's not that it will necessarily happen. Inkatha and some smaller proxies put the ANC back into power in Gauteng and back into power at a national level. The real kind of shake-up happens if Gates and McKenzie takes the DA to below 50% in the Western Cape. Then the DA needs the Freedom Front to form a government in the Western Cape, failing which McKenzie and the ANC can get into power in the Western Cape. And then that just changes the outlook completely for the country, and do similar deals around national government with other ANC proxies, smaller parties that lean ANC, and do the same in Gauteng. The point of you don't need to follow all of that because it's complex. The point I'm making is that there are a myriad of options at this time, and they're going to be, the number of options is going to increase over the next, over the period until the election next year. And the short of an ANC majority, it's not infinite, but there are going to be a wide range of mathematical formulations that can put a government into power. And the point that we've made as SRF to some of the politicians are the people that govern the future South Africa and its provinces aren't necessarily going to be the biggest parties, they're going to be the best deal makers. And political deal making and building alliances around deals is going to be one of the key skills that determines whether you're in government, whether you're not.
And when you say deal making, I mean, this is, a coalition, or let's say proportional representation systems, that's really what it looks like. I mean, we need to look no further than, say, Israel, for example. It's cobbling together coalitions at every level.
But why did Netanyahu win? Because he built better and more creative deals on the right than his opponents could on the left. Same reasoning and rules are going to apply here evermore.
And guys, what talking about the coalitions, man, do you think that the coalitions are going to work for South Africa? Because I've heard people saying, okay, we might see this coalition on some province, just like Dr. Frans Cronje is throwing out these scenarios that might take place in 2024. But do you think that South Africa, do you think that we are ready for coalition governments, man? Do you think that South Africa is ready for coalition governments? You look at our political party, you look at our political leaders, you look at the mess they always do there in parliament. Do you think these guys are ready to go into coalition? Do you think that coalition is the way to go for South Africa? Do you think that if South Africa gets into coalition government, it will prosper, for lack of a better word? Do you think that coalitions are good for South Africa? Because I am worried about the coalitions, man. I am worried that this country is going on a path that we might find ourselves in such a huge chaos after 2024 elections. So what are your thoughts on the coalitions, man? Are we ready as a country to go into coalitions? Are we ready?
But between now and the elections, this is all if the elections were held today, are there any sort of X factors that could happen that would throw the thing up?
How does the ANC lose terribly? These things happen. Mr. Ramaphosa goes. His national popularity is way down, but he's strongly popular amongst ANC voters. Load shedding gets a lot worse ahead of the election. Gets truly terrible. And the border opposition, the third factor, work together really efficiently. If those three things happen, the border coalition is working together brilliantly, wherever it governs. No more squabbling. And Mr. Ramaphosa is gone. And load shedding is at stage a lot. ANC can lose the election by a landslide, opposition come to power. But at this time, the border coalition are squabbling, load shedding is diminishing, and Mr. Ramaphosa is going to stick around for the election. These are all factors that... just think, when we last spoke, many people viewing this were very pessimistic on load shedding. It's now better. 3 months' time when we speak, some of these factors will have rearranged themselves again. And they'll do so again and again before we get to the election. So there are no firm certainties here. But on current trends, the ANC, with the support of smaller parties if needed, will govern South Africa for the 5 years to 2029.
Yes.
And opposition in the three big provinces, and most likely, and then this is entering in now the new era of the country, which is essentially coalition governments.
That's right. 400 years, I don't know if we said this last time, 400 years of history in the territory that's modern South Africa. Always one major player, or predominantly one major player, political player, has had the ability to force policies that had to be acceded to by the country's inhabitants, even before it was a country, just into the territory. That's changing now. And if we remain a free society, otherwise, if we head off the threat of the ANC EFF destroying the constitutional edifice, they will never be in that position again. And way out into let's go a decade out into the future, our biggest political parties are going to have just over a third of the vote, likely a kind of national Africanist rural party. Our second biggest political party might have around a quarter of the vote, and that's going to be a very cosmopolitan, urban, kind of mobile, younger, middle-class party. So that gives us, let's say, 35 and 25, that gives us 60. About 10-15% are going to be the radical Marxist left, and everything in the middle of that is going to be carved up by smaller political parties with 2, 3, 4, 5, 6% of the vote, often quite far to the right, and often with an ethnic nationalist kind of a political base. And what I've described to you, if you're familiar with Israeli politics, not far off the kind of structure of the Knesset. And if you're familiar with German politics, it's not far off the structure of the Bundestag. And this is our natural political evolution. It's likely to continue. And in such a structure, it's the deal makers that govern. And the same rules are going to most likely apply here as well.
Frans, I want to just thank you for all the time that you've given today, and I think it's so important for us to continue these conversations every few weeks or months, just to touch base, get a rational perspective on what's going on, and I think it's important to speak out all of the concerns. That's what I've been trying to do this evening, share the concerns of where the community is, and I'm so grateful to you and our community is for the work that you're doing and the work that the SRF is doing to bring rational context to things that are happening in South Africa.
Well, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to talk to you this evening, and I look forward to the next one. Thank you.
Yes.
So guys, what are your thoughts, man? What are your thoughts on this conversation? Because it is very interesting, man. It is very interesting what Dr. Frans Cronje is saying, because one of the scenarios, man, is the DA losing power there in the Western Cape. So guys, what are your thoughts on this conversation? Please tell me what you think on the comment section. Don't forget to hit that like button, and the most important part is subscribe. My name is Thomas Mabaso, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.